Thank you for listening to NSL Doubletalk.
Never stop learning.
At Never Stop Learning, we connect you with engaging experts who join you and your friends or colleagues in conversation at a location of your choosing. With NSL Doubletalk, we are bringing the Never Stop Learning model directly to you. Each podcast will feature two experts in conversation on topics that range from global affairs to wellness to arts to innovation. Sometimes the experts agree, sometimes they don't, but we will never stop learning and never stop laughing.
En español.
NSL Doubletalk featuring Lisa Sotto and Eric Friedberg. Their topic today is cybersecurity. Should we be concerned? Lisa has been named among the National Law Journal's 100 most influential lawyers, and she chairs Hunton's top-ranked global privacy and cybersecurity practice. Lisa serves as the chairperson of the Department of Homeland Security's Data Privacy and Integrity Advisory Committee. She is the editor and lead author of the Privacy and Cybersecurity Law Deskbook. Eric has over 30 years of public and private sector experience in law, cybercrime response, IT security, forensics, investigations, and e-discovery. He has helped many Fortune 500 companies improve their governance and technology initiatives. We are so excited to welcome Lisa and Eric to NSL Doubletalk.
Lisa, we were just talking about data breach notification, and we all, as individuals, have experienced this personally. We all get in the mail those notifications from companies that have been hacked saying that our data potentially has been compromised, and it's an upsetting thing to get. I remember when I got one where a government entity was hacked, and they literally sent me a notice in which they advised me that my digital fingerprints from when I was a prosecutor are now in the hands of the Chinese government.
I suspect that's the Office of Personnel Management data breach.
It was very unsettling. And so people are getting these all the time. You sort of get numb to it, but you can get numb to it. And so why don't we talk a little bit about how should individuals sort of protect themselves against that kind of notification? Is it all out of their hands, or are there things they can do?
Well, it's not all out of their hands, although I wouldn't say that it's also completely in the individual's control. I used to ask years ago when I was speaking in front of an audience, I would ask how many have not received data breach notification letters. And, I would get probably 60, 70%. Now, when I ask the question, zero, literally zero hands go up. Every single person in every room in which we both speak have received data breach notification letters. So what can you do as an individual to protect yourselves? So make sure that you have an identity protection solution in place, whether that's credit monitoring, dark web monitoring, or some other type of monitoring solution. It's also important to pull your credit reports on a periodic basis, and you're entitled to one each year from each of the nationwide consumer reporting agencies. That's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And you need to go to those sites to be able to pull your credit reports and make sure that you don't see anything unusual on those credit reports. So that's an important technique that we can use as individuals. By all means, do not give your Social Security number to anyone unless you absolutely have to. We have seen on so many, for example, doctors in doctors' offices, on the forms that you fill out when you first go to a new doctor, there's a little box for Social Security number. Why in the world does a doctor need your Social Security number when that has no correlation anymore to your health plan number? Used to, but it doesn't anymore. Make sure you're shredding sensitive documents. So there are certainly some techniques that we can use as individuals to help protect our information. Another one that's very important is the use of multi-factor authentication and complex passphrases. So over 16 digits is very much recommended now. So use a passphrase rather than a password. And to the extent you can use multi-factor authentication, certainly do so. And I think biometrics are also really coming into their own as methods of authentication for individuals.
It's interesting on biometrics. I will not use biometrics for the following reason, although now you have to do that for your iPhone 10, I suppose. But if you get your password compromised, right, what can you do? Once it's compromised, what do?
You change your password.
You change your password. If you're using your fingerprints or your face as if that becomes the norm and then some hacker gets that file or that cryptographic sum that can substitute for your fingerprints or your face, you can't change either of those, right?
You bet. And the hope is that that data is so heavily encrypted when it's stored that it really will only link to your face or your fingerprints or your retinal scans. I agree it's problematic, although I do think biometrics are the way of the future. I think we're going to start to see entree into various web portals or venues through use of biometrics.
Well, there's such ease of use.
Right. So it's a little bit of a value proposition there. It's easy. There are a few obstacles put in your path when you're using biometrics on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a little bit scary.
Sure. I mean, we've obviously identified a lot of what the problems are. There's plenty of solutions, right? I mean, we've seen people, I've seen people, and you've seen people, and industries and companies really up their cybersecurity where they're very tightened up and shipshape. And the saying goes, nobody's unhackable. I mean, if some state-sponsored set of top military hackers wants to break into something and they have a year and a half to do it, they're probably going to get there. But that's the better posture for you where you've created that much of a speed bump where it will take somebody a year to break into your network. And I've seen that over time where people follow an organized plan and have the governance and the will to increase their cybersecurity. And what I find is that the thing that distinguishes the companies with the best cybersecurity from the companies with not such great cybersecurity is governance and tone at the top and board level and CEO level buy-in. Because once you have CEO and board level buy-in, then the chief information security officer and the CIO don't feel like they are out there fighting this battle by themselves. They have all these people that have their back, not only with organizational support, but with budget. And organizational support is a perfect example, and law firms are a great example of this issue. At many law firms, it's very difficult to impose cybersecurity strictures that make connecting and moving data less convenient, right? And so the top lawyers have a very hard time with that because they view tough cybersecurity measures as somehow slowing them down and decreasing their competitiveness in the market, whether that's the case or not. If the executive committee of the law firm basically says, we are doing this, it gets done. But if the CIO says we are doing this, guess what? It doesn't get done because there's 20 high-powered lawyers that are bringing in $20 to $50 million a year in revenue, and the CIO just does not have the firepower to sort of say to those people, no, we're using multi-factor, and if you're on a plane and you forgot your RSA token, guess what? You can't get on the internet, and you're going to have to watch movies between here and London, right? Which is not what your major lawyer wants to hear.
You bet, absolutely. And in fact, we've been hired by a number of law firms over the last few years to come in and assist them. And you mentioned, Eric, earlier, tabletop exercises. They're so important, these sorts of games that you play, because if you can do a tabletop exercise really over and over, one time is not enough. You have to do them multiple times. The idea is to build muscle memory around how to handle an event, because an event will happen. A breach, a data compromise will happen. The question is, how well do you respond to it when it does? And the only way to respond well is to practice, to have an incident response plan in place. That's a state-of-the-art incident response plan that evolves over time because this is a very dynamic environment. Number two, do tabletop exercises. Make sure your incident response response team knows who they are. Make sure that you have a data breach notification toolkit or some other handbook in place so that you know the types of communications that you're going to have to make. And then we talked about this, making sure you have a vendor management program in place to ensure that your vendors can put in place the safeguards that you expect them to put in place.
Yeah. And I would add to that, metrics is so important. In other words, it's one thing where you are reporting up to the board more anecdotally and thematically about your cybersecurity. You cannot manage a cybersecurity program anecdotally and thematically in PowerPoints. So the key to success in this area is saying, first, given who I am as a company and what the threat landscape looks like and what my own attack history is as a company, what is important to us and what are our crown jewels and what are we trying to protect first and foremost? Then you look at the domains and see which security domains align most importantly with the things that you're trying to protect the most. And then you measure objectively your security in those domains over time. Because what I find is that, and this is happening now, and it's just happening over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, where the board wants an objective set of criteria and a dashboard to say, how are we doing in this area? It's an enormous project to turn a company from a point where they don't have a standard and where they aren't measuring themselves numerically to one that is. And that's probably a 2 to 3 year cycle, but it's doable. And I've seen many companies do it, and they're so much better off for it.
And 2 to 3 years is a very short window in the life of the attack timeline. So I think it's very important to do it now, to start it now if you haven't started that. At the individual level, also, you can do things like make sure that you have antivirus protection in place, like Norton or Malwarebytes, one of the vendors, to make sure that you have that on your own computer. So don't forget your individual security as well. I think it's important just to hit on what's happening today. I think the environment today is absolutely exploding, where we have very significantly increased awareness among the public about both privacy and cybersecurity. We now have, as of last year, a very important law in California that passed in the course of a week that really changes the shape of individual rights with respect to data privacy. Individuals in California now have the right to access the data that companies have about them, also have the right in many instances to delete that data and to opt out of the sale of that data. So we are seeing a very significant change both at the state level, and now the federal government is also taking up similar measures. So we may see a very significant change at the federal level as well. Something to keep an eye on. Thank you very much, Eric. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Lisa. Great seeing you as always.
For conversations you can't ignore, come back every Monday and Thursday for new episodes. Subscribe now and never stop learning.